And there we are, the fourth webinar, which is entitled Plan of Analysis or Alignment. In this webinar, I will try to give answers to only two questions. The first one is how are research aims, questions, and methods aligned? And the second one, what does a plan of analysis contain? And actually, I'm not going to introduce anything new. So for the people who have been following the previous seminars, you will probably recognize some of the examples that I used, but now applied from a different perspective and here and there maybe worked out a little bit further. Basically, this webinar will only cover two examples, which I hope can serve for you for your own study well as an example of how to check if you have created this alignment yourself. And I would like to remind everyone again, if you have questions about the content of the webinar, please use the Q&A option for it and not the chat option. Thank you for that. And I'm going to check it halfway and see if there's something that I can answer and I can help with. Also, during this webinar, I would like to use a new feature in WebEx. It's called polling. It's actually a very short poll I've created with 3 or 4 questions because I'm really keen on finding out what you think about, well, issues that I'm going to cover. So let's see how that's going to work out. For me, it's also very new. I couldn't try it out. I tried yesterday, but somehow WebEx didn't allow me to try it out. So hopefully it will work for you and for myself, but I will let you know when we get to that point. So how are research aims, questions, and methods aligned? So this very first slide with the title Alignment in Research actually covers the only idea that I would like to explain and I would like to elaborate upon today. The idea that the decisions you've been making in the process of designing your project are very much related to each other. I think I can speak of chain of reaction in terms of decisions that you have made at the very beginning when you have been formulating the needs for your bachelor thesis or the need for the project until one of the very last steps in this process right now, and that's, for instance, deciding on how to analyze your data. So I've created quickly this chain of reaction, and I would like to go bit by bit and highlight some of those steps. There's nothing new. We've been discussing this extensively in the course, so for the people who are following the BT course, this is for sure not new. But here and there might be some new pointers and maybe just some refreshment of suggestions that you have to have a good look at for your own study. And when I talk about alignment, which is a term which has been borrowed from educational practices, when I talk about alignment, I actually talk about alignment between the need that you have defined for your project. So you started with the need for an advice, or the need for a change, or the need for a new initiative, and you moved on further to specifying what is generally that you would like to achieve with your project, what is generally that you would like to achieve with the type of intervention, meaning a design report, a business plan, or an advisory report that you're proposing. And very often you've been using those general terms, a general word in expressing what you would like to achieve with your project. Most probably you moved further in specifying the more specific objectives. We talked a lot about objectives in the previous webinar and in the webinar about theory. After the objectives, some of you have been thinking in terms of questions, which I like to refer to as knowledge questions. So asking yourself, what do I need to know in order to be able to reach that general aim and in order to be able to reach those specific objectives I have formulated for myself? For some of you who decided to adopt design thinking as their approach, then probably you do not have any questions. In the sense of research questions, including a main research question and a sub-question, but you still ask yourself, what do I need to know first, and you probably use the answer to those questions for your literature review. So in case you decided to use the design approach, you probably skipped that step of actually formulating research questions, but the majority of you, I trust, have those. In the meanwhile, you also have to decide on the knowledge domain in which your project fits. If you recall the previous webinar, I've introduced the Bivariate standards as the knowledge domains that you've been working with, like strategic management, operations management, marketing, management information systems. We have a couple of knowledge domains, and you could use those knowledge domains as a way to frame your project as well. It will also help you to understand and confirm in which field within the facility or hotel management you're really becoming an expert, and that helps you to theoretically frame your project further. By theoretical framing, I mean the step where you decide what to read and to write about in your literature review part. But slowly but surely now you're also coming to the point when you have to decide on what kind of data do you need, and you have to ask yourself a couple of questions at the same time, meaning how are you going to collect the data? So what is the data collection instrument that you are going to use? Is it going to be a brainstorm session? Is it going to be a focus group? Is it going to be a questionnaire? Is it going to be an interview? Related to it is the question, what is the data type that you're going to end up with? How much of data do you need? Who do you need to involve when you collect your data? So that's related to sampling strategy. You also were, in this stage, you're also forced to think of what exactly are you going to ask about, meaning how are you going to define operationally the concepts that you're interested in. So what exactly your data collection questions will be. Is it in a questionnaire or in an interview? That doesn't really matter. So the operational definitions are very much related to, do you measure what you intend to measure? And how do you define what you intend to measure? That will for sure lead you to the idea of talking and writing about variables and possibly indicators of those variables if you work with multidimensional variables. If you decided to get engaged in quantitative design, then you will also come to the point where you have to formulate hypotheses, 1, 2, 3 or more. You will have to decide what descriptive statistics you will need and which statistical tests you will need in order to find out if there are relationship or associations between the variables. If you have decided to conduct a qualitative type of study, you will have to think of your coding strategy, and you also have to think of approaching your qualitative data. So the analysis approach is what I mean by this. And the whole idea of alignment is that you need to realize that whatever the need you specified at the very beginning for advice, change, or a new initiative, and the words that you have been using to specify your general aim and specific research objectives actually already set the tone in terms of what kind of literature do you need to frame your project, and most importantly, what kind of methodology you are going to use in order to be able to reach that aim and to answer the questions if you have specified those. Same goes for statistical tests, and same goes for the analysis approach in qualitative research. At the end, whatever comes out of those analyses, it will have to give you that output that you're hoping for, which will eventually help you to reach that aim that you have been formulating at the very beginning. I could have also drawn this as a circle and not as separate steps. And it seems that they're separate steps, but the decisions that you have to make about those topics are very much related to each other. And that's the whole idea of alignment. Realizing at the very beginning that the words you choose actually already define to a huge extent what one might expect in terms of methodology that you're going to choose. And now what I would like to do is I would like to use 2 examples and show you how that might work in reality with a bit of your input as well. Before I do that, if you look at those circles on the right side of the screen, so the data collection instrument until the analysis approach, you could actually say that those topics will be a big part of your methodology section of your thesis. That's absolutely clear. But also, those are decisions which you're going to make and which will define your plan of analysis as well. So which statistical test you can use it depends very much on the operational definitions and the types of variables that you have. It depends very much on the level of measurement of your variables. Same goes for your coding strategy. Your coding strategy, if it's deductive, inductive, or both for that matter, also very much influences how you're going to analyze that data. But all of these steps are eventually related to the plan of analysis as well, which is one of the final steps in designing your research before you can actually start and gather the data yourself. I still see people who start collecting data without having at least a vague idea about the type of analysis that they would like to run. And very often afterwards you face up with challenges you cannot fix anymore. Like you really wanted to make a comparison between groups, but the level of measurement you used with variables do not allow you so. Or you really wanted to know how different variables are correlated. However, you didn't use the right level of measurement in the questionnaire, so you cannot run an analysis like this. That's why it is essential at this stage of your project to realize how the initial need is very much related to the type of analysis that you are choosing. So let's have a look now at an example. The first one that I have in here. And the first example, which I called example A, is related to the idea that, this is all hypothetical by the way, related to the idea that an organization is doubting about the effectiveness of used communication channels. Effectiveness seems to be somewhere, one way or another, a magic word. I see it very often in your studies. So trying to find out the effectiveness of a strategy, but in this example of communication channels, is actually quite a common question. So that's initially the problem. So obviously the effectiveness of the used communication channels in this hypothetical example is not known. So the main research question formulated for the purpose is, how effective are internet and intranet channels as a means to communicate to NHTV students? You can say that the general aim of such a study could be to make recommendations about each channel's future use and fitness for purpose. I think it's rather logical. You could already say as well, this will be most probably then a advisory report. After an initial some reading, there have been some sub-questions formulated, and those are: which internet and intranet channels are used for student communication? What are the organizational objectives for each channel, and how is effectiveness defined? What are the advantages and disadvantages each channel is perceived by the NHTV students? Which measures of effectiveness for each channel are there? And what is the level of effectiveness for each channel used? Now, in the process of finding out an answer to those questions, I figured out that those questions are different, hence the different colors. They do something different for me, so I use them differently. What do I mean? This one, which measures of effectiveness for each channel are there, it's actually a question which I'm asking myself, as it's a very relevant one, but it's a question that I need to answer in my literature review. Going back to the general aim and the main research question, well, if I want to know effectiveness of channels, I would need to know in general how can effectiveness be measured to start with. But it's not in its essence a research question per se. It's more a question which will guide my literature review. Same goes for the first two questions, which I initially considered as being sub-questions. in fact, finding out which channels are used currently and what are the organizational objectives. So what did NHTV define as an objective to use each channel, and how is effectiveness defined as such. So I could say after a while that those 3 questions are not real research questions. They're not going to guide my investigation further on. So I'll definitely answer them and use them as guiding my literature review. So those, in fact, you can say already 3 topics in the literature review. The ones colored in red are those different, and I can already define those as being my empirical questions, meaning that those are for sure sub-questions which I can answer if I gather data myself in the field. So the first one, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each channel as perceived by the NHTV students? At the end of the day, you see how that is also directly related to the main research question. And the second one, what is the level of effectiveness for each channel used currently? Those 2 for sure can be considered as being my empirical questions. And if we think about how Gray defines research questions, I could say that this one, in the way it's formulated, is a descriptive question. It starts with what is very much focused on the level of effectiveness of each channel. So there's only one concept in it. And this one sounds more as an interpretative question, looking at the perspective of the users of those channels, specifically the NHTV students. So now I'm coming at the point of deciding how to continue further. So if those are the only 2 empirical questions I'm asking, they are actually guiding where I'm going to collect data, what kind of data I need, what is the data collection instrument that I'm going to use, how many participants do I need to be able to answer those questions, and so on and so forth. So all those different steps that I covered briefly at the beginning. So let's see, what do you think of this? So if we take the very first question, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each channel as perceived by the NHTV students? Once again, I think that we can say that this is an interpretative or exploratory question in terms of Gray. And if you recall, Gray also makes a distinction between state-oriented and process-oriented questions. And to me, this is a state-oriented question. I'm interested in the perception of the students of those advantages and disadvantages. I'm not interested in how that developed over time. I only want to know currently what they perceived as being the advantages and disadvantages. And that's why I thought this, to me, seems as a state-oriented question. So let's try the polling feature right now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen with you for a moment and see if I can start a poll. So basically in the poll, I'm asking you to think along with me for a couple of minutes how you will go along answering this question. Give me a sec to see how I can make this work. There it is. Okay, so there's the first poll specifically related to about this question. It will also pop up on your screen, I hope. Okay, I'm opening it now. So if everything goes well, you see it now in your screen. So there are 4 questions I would like you to think now and answer for me in the next couple of minutes. I'm going to give you some time to do so. we're almost there. Majority of you answered it, so a couple of more minutes will be okay. I can have a look, see what you think of this. Still waiting for a couple of people to finish the last questions. And we can have a look together, see what you think and what I think. It's going well. In 3 minutes time, you know how to deal with this. That's a very good thing. Now I have to see how I can open this. All right, I think the majority of you already managed to answer all the questions. So I'm going to close the poll now and see what you think of it. We need to give WebEx 10 more seconds to do so, to submit all the responses, and then we can have a look what you thought of the approach that we can adopt when answering this question. Let's see if I can have a look at the results. Where are they? Okay, you're seeing the results, I believe, because I just pressed the button share with attendees. So you're seeing now the poll results. So if can you please confirm quickly if you do so? I suppose you do. I'm really curious how it looks like for you. Yes, you do. That's a good thing. Thank you. All right. So, so the first question. So the first question is, which approach would you adopt, right? So to answer this question, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each channel? The majority of you say answer number C, qualitative. And I will have to agree with you. I think I already gave it away as well to a certain extent by saying it's interpretative and a state-oriented question. I don't quite see how design thinking will do the trick for us in here, and nobody decided or suggested that too. And whenever we talk about perceived by the AHTV students, then perception is very often, though, considered as something which we can best understand if we talk to people, because perception is very often related to it's a deeper experience, feeling, whatever you want to call it. It's obviously not the same as perception, but perception is a complicated concept, and majority of people studying perception believe indeed that qualitative type of questions are much more fit for the purpose of finding out what people perceive, and specifically when we talk about advantages and disadvantages. Some of you, though, think that quantitative or a mixed approach can be also applied. Too bad now that we don't have this two-way interaction, but I think that you can be that can be for sure a possibility, even though only a quantitative I don't quite see. I think mixed is definitely possible. For example, you could say, all right, first I'm going to talk to a small group of people, so students, I mean students, to find out how they perceive the different communication channels, what they find as an advantage, what they find as a disadvantage, and afterwards, in order to be able to generalize my findings to all NHTV students, based on all the answers, for instance, of interviews of a couple of focus groups, I'm going to send out a survey to all NHTV students. So I'm going to measure on a bigger scale if indeed the students find specific advantages and disadvantages as being formulated in advance also the same way. But this is a very open question. There's no idea of confirming a theory or hypothesis about what possibly advantages and disadvantages could be, or what are possible factors influencing those. Then definitely my initial idea meets yours, that qualitative design will fit this kind of questions. Then I'm very curious how to see what you answered to number 3 and 4. Somehow it doesn't pop out on my screen, which is interesting. And then on the question of where you gather the data, the majority of the group thinks in the field. Yeah, I agree so too. So if this is definitely an empirical type of question, I think I also gave it away a little bit, meaning that you will have to somehow get to respondents, get to people qualitatively or quantitatively in order to find out how they perceive those communication channels. The idea of quasi-experiments is interesting, though. I think that is also an interesting one. Especially when it comes to communication channels, because this is something that you can change on this, which communication channels are used and which information is posted on different communication channels can vary even within a day, even well within a week for sure, but also within days. So I think the idea of setting up a quasi-experiment is also an interesting one for this specific question. But you see that the majority of you will probably decide to approach this qualitatively. So far, quasi-experiments are not really used that often in our by our graduates, which is a pity, because I believe that indeed for some questions, quasi-experiments might be much more efficient in terms of answering and reaching that goals you have formulated. And I really wanted to have a look now at your question number 3, question number 4. How come I don't see the results? Where do I see it? This is not really helping me then. How can I see what you have answered on number 3 and number 4? Well, this is a good experiment, which is not really working for me right now. So where then are the answers to those 2 questions? Where did they go? I can't really see it here on my screen. I hope I can see it later, but for now, this is it's not there, so that's a pity. So halfway my trial to use the poll is working, but not the other half. Do you see something when it comes to question number 3 and 4? I really wonder, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, those. No. Some of you are trying to help me out. Thank you for that. Well, okay, let's not waste more time on this. So if we think of which data collection instrument could be used, then yeah, you see only part of your answers. I thought so, but I wanted to see all of your answers at the same time. So if you think of qualitative approach and then in the field, then most probably you've been thinking of interviews, you've been thinking of focus groups. If it is a quasi-experiment, then it will be a different thing, but for sure, if you have thought of a traditional qualitative design, then most probably those two data collection instruments popped up, meaning focus groups and one-on-one interviews. And when you talk about interviews, you always have to think of what type of interview you think best fits the purpose of this question. Is it going to be structured, semi-structured, or unstructured interview? And immediately related to that is the question of which data type are you going to end up dealing with. And that's an essential question as well to ask yourself, because that will help you define later on what is the type of analysis that you can run, because that is very much related again to the type of data that you're collecting. Well, in case of interviews or focus groups, then transcripts is the data type that you're going to end up with. So that's qualitative, written text in the shape of transcripts that you will indeed that you could work with. Then I'm very curious what you think about the second one. So the second one, to me, descriptive question: what is the level of effectiveness for each channel used? So I would like to run quickly the same kind of poll, but now thinking of how would you go along answering this question? So what is the level of effectiveness for each channel used? And I'm opening it right now. So let's have a look what you think again of the general approach of this second question and where you can gather your data. I'm in particular interested about the first one. This one should go probably very, very fast. I have the feeling that some people left me, but let's see. You're almost done. Still waiting only for one person, and then I can close the poll. Very curious what you think of right now. Since you're almost there. Okay. Let's close the poll now. Just seconds. WebEx is processing your answers. There they are, and I'm going to share them with you right now. So now you also have the results. It's a pity to hear that some of you have problems using the poll. Maybe you can tell me later or in the chat a bit more extensively what kind of problem you experience, because I can't quite see from here what the problem could be. Well, as you see, you think that quantitative approach is probably the most well, the one you will choose to answer this question. So what is the level of effectiveness for each channel used? And I'm actually very happy to see that you think that way. And because level of effectiveness very, very often is, even the word level of is related to quantitative way of measuring concepts. That's a very typical way to express variations in, for instance, level of satisfaction, level of effectiveness, experience differences. So any fluctuations we often think in even on a term on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 to 7, or 1 to 10, and most often those kind of words are used as well. The level of, which implies automatically quantitative type of approach. So I'm a bit confused to see that where you get the information. Some of you will think behind the desk, and only 3 of you actually say in the field. I think we have to clarify something in terms of field research and desk research. For the people who were there during the seminar in group 1 within the course this morning, then this will be probably a repetition. But when we talk about field research and desk research, we talk about 2 extremely different things. Because when you say this is what is the level of effectiveness for each channel used, and think of the fact that I already defined this as an empirical question, it means that I'm going to collect the data myself. It means that I'm going to measure the level of effectiveness for each channel used. Most probably when adopting the quantitative design by means of a questionnaire, then I cannot do that behind the desk. Desk research means something completely different. Desk research means that you're going to use secondary data, for instance, statistics, which are gathered for a different purpose, but freely available for you and also applicable for your research. Desk research does not entail you sending out questionnaires. The moment you are the one gathering your data by means of questionnaires, interviews, observations, brainstorm sessions, what have you in terms of data collection instruments, you are conducting field research. And in this case, I'm very much interested in the level of effectiveness of each channel used. So I have to measure that. And if I measure it quantitatively, I'm going to send out most probably a questionnaire to all NHTV students. I found quickly when I was preparing for today a very short paper from a doctoral student, and where communication effectiveness is one of the concepts. And there, for instance, one can find a couple of items specifically related to measuring communication effectiveness in a different sector than ours. But this was definitely could be seen, for instance, as a lead. So very quickly, even in this stage of designing your project, you can find out if there are possible existing scales. So if there are, in other words, studies already reported who have been measuring the same concepts that you're interested in this case, effectiveness of communication. And in that paper, it was called communication effectiveness. But when one reads the definition, it boils down to the same idea as I have in this hypothetical example. So I would say no, I'm definitely going into the field, and I'm not going to answer this one behind the desk. So, and again, a quasi-experiment pops up as an idea. I'm not quite sure how you see this as a possibility to measure, to use quasi-experiment design. This is a very descriptive question. So what will be then the experimental condition and the non-experimental, so the control group? I don't quite see it myself at the very beginning. So I will definitely stick to quantitative approach with this one. I would like to have a look now quickly if there are some questions in the Q&A section and see if I can answer those some way. Let's see. There's a question about mixed design. Do you have a hypothesis if you work with mixed designs? Well, if mixed design entails that you have question which is answered by qualitative and question which is answered by quantitative approach, it looks very much as what we talk about in here. I think I can already share my screen with you. I'll do that in a minute. Let's see if I can share my application only. I can share the PowerPoint with you. There it is. So you probably see the PowerPoint again right now, and only the PowerPoint. So the idea indeed, do you have a hypothesis or not? It depends on the type of quantitative question that you have. Because in this example, the one I'm using right now, this is a descriptive question. And the hypothesis usually entails testing relationship between variables. So in case you talk about relationships, associations between variables, then definitely you need to have a hypothesis. But then we don't talk about descriptive questions, but we'll talk about explanatory type of questions in quantitative terms. And then indeed you do need one. For such kind of descriptive questions which can be answered quantitatively, I'm not necessarily, to be perfectly honest. Let's see what else you have in the Q&A section. Yeah, a comment from one of you, which is definitely a good one. We first need to define effectiveness in order to see how it can be measured. Absolutely, you're absolutely right to a certain extent, because regardless of the theoretical definition of effectiveness, the operational definition, meaning how you're going to measure it by aiming for quantitative data for the purpose, for instance, of comparing effectiveness between channels, or qualitative data, for instance, with the purpose of really defining effectiveness from the perspective of the NHTV student. Those are indeed two different things. So the definition, the theoretical definition of effectiveness as such, does not necessarily define how I'm going to measure effectiveness. It is the purpose of my research that defines which design I'm going to choose, quantitative, qualitative, or a mix of both. That's exactly what I've been doing right now out loud. If I'm aiming at finding out which channels are more or less effective than others, which fit more or less the purpose of the NHTV, then I'll be more focusing on, or I'll be for sure using quantitative design, which is more suitable for answering such kind of questions, in the contrary to trying to really understand how effectiveness is experienced by the NHTV students in this case. Then I will tend more at using qualitative design for this second question of example A. Oh, it got a bit confusing with question A and question B. I don't see other questions in the Q&A at this point. So before I move on to the next example, what I'm trying to do right now with this hypothetical research is let you think of how the general aim, and in my case, I can go back the slides. As I said, it's really doubtful what the effectiveness of the youth communication channel is, and the general aim is to make recommendations which channels to use and how they fit the purpose, meaning how they fit the organizational objectives in this case. So a mixed design probably will be successful, it will fit the purpose meaning being able to make recommendations about those channels, and the fact that I'm also keen on making such recommendations let me think that I would like to make some kind of a comparison between channels. So that's why I tend to decide to approach quantitatively the second one, what is the level of effectiveness for each channel used, Also because then I can, on a broader term, find out what is the level of effectiveness by adopting this quantitative design, which will make me generalize my findings towards all NHTV students and not only a small group of students. So, and this is in fact what I meant with alignment. So looking carefully at the very beginning of the need for your project, the words that you use to formulate your questions, which will help you decide which methodology you could adopt. With this, I do not say that there's only one way to Rome. In many cases, there are more indeed. You can choose quantitative or qualitative. Both fit to a certain extent the purpose of the study. The idea is that you know why, and you're able to justify why you have chosen one in particular, and very often there are different reasons. There are methodological explanations, like saying that being able to compare between effectiveness of communication channels, a quantitative approach much more fit that purpose. Sometimes also pragmatic explanations can be good enough to justify why you have chosen a specific approach. In that you also show that you realize what the consequences of a chosen approach. At one side, if you're going for interviews, it takes a while before you can plan all the interviews. But it takes even more to transcribe interviews and analyze those afterwards. You will need different time and access to a bigger audience if you decide for quantitative approach. So sometimes it's not right or wrong, it's just which methodology fits the purpose of your study, but also the practical considerations that you deal with. Enough about that. Let's have a look on example B. I also used this one previously. This example is related to unsatisfied customers at the catering, so that's definitely a problem. Customers at company X, company are not happy with what is offered, and one of the ideas is that service quality somehow influences the satisfaction of customers. So the main research question which is asked is, what is the effect of service quality on how satisfied customers are at the catering company? And for this particular project, I've decided to approach service quality by using the idea of Brady and Cronin Jr., so the adjusted model of service quality. They have used the GAPS model and the refinement by Parasurman to come up with the proposition that service quality can be distinguished between expected and perceived service quality. Moreover, I think this question is a typical explanatory question, asking about the relationship between service quality and level of satisfaction in a specific company. And generally what I would like to do with a project like that is I would like to be able to predict how satisfaction could be improved by looking specifically at changes of service quality. So I'm actually already assuming that if I change something in the service quality, that will also change the level of customer satisfaction. And you can already say, obviously, a hypothesis could be that the higher the service quality, the higher the level of customer satisfaction. So the whole idea is based on this positive relationship. Sounds rather straightforward, but you see how this already helps me to define my methodology as well. Because if that's what I'm aiming to do, I'm aiming to explain how these two issues are related, and I'm keen on being able to predict what management could do in order to influence the level of satisfaction. Now the question obviously is, how are you going to go answering this one? So what will be then the methodology fitting this purpose? What will be the data collection instrument fitting this purpose, and so on and so forth? Don't forget that quality and satisfaction are both multi-dimensional concepts. At one side, we can measure quality and satisfaction by asking one single question, but we know that reality is much more complex than that. So I would like to run the same third and last for today poll, wondering what you think of this one now. And I think I gave it away to a huge extent. Let's see if we can start the third one. Yeah, I started the third poll now. So which approach would you now suggest yourself? So again, the question is, what is the effect of service quality on how satisfied customers are at a catering company? I'm curious what you think of this. All right. Let's see. Meanwhile, I'm going to check and see if there are some questions popping up in the Q&A section. I don't see any. Okay. All right. We're almost done. A couple of people are still finishing the last questions. I still need to find out what you are answering at number 3, number 4. I hope I will get the information when we close the webinar. And if I do, and if I find something interesting in your answers, I will share those files with you as well when I make when I make the webinar available. And I'm really curious if your answers will pop up. But at least now I know for the future that somehow I do not see it on my screen. And I really wanted to see what you think of the data collection instruments. Okay, I think we're done. Let's close it. And I'm going to share in a second the results with you. WebEx is processing, so 8 more seconds. All right, so there they are, the poll results for you. Okay, so let's have a look. Which approach would you choose? Well, there's again a bit of a competition between quantitative and qualitative. So just with 2 voices extra, you think quantitative will be the approach. And I'm very, very happy to see that the majority of you think this is field research and not desk research. It's very much related to the example previously discussed indeed. So I will agree with you that it's field research, meaning that you will get into the field in one way or another to find the answers to this question and to measure service quality and satisfaction. I'm a bit surprised though that some of you think that this is a qualitative, that qualitative approach will fit the purpose, because this seems to me to be a question demanding quantitative approach. This is clearly a question, even in the way I have visualized the concept, this is a question about relationships. This is a question about investigating how service quality influences the customer satisfaction. You're seeing my screens, right? My screen, right? Yeah, you are. So the moment a relationship is visualized like this, it implies it assumes quantitative approach, because it is only the quantitative approach which could test if there's a relationship between the service quality and the customer satisfaction. Even in words, only in statistics and in such kind of designs, we talk about positive and negative relationships, and we use the pluses and minuses to denote such kind of relationships. If this was a qualitative type of design, I wouldn't have chosen such linear representation of the relationship between those two concepts. So I'm a little bit surprised, again, to see that some of you think qualitative will be the approach chosen. Once again, for me, this is pure some quantitative one. And we can also take it one step further in thinking of how to test even such kind of relationships. I need to save the poll questions now so I can move further and share with you more on my screen. Yes, I want to save everything. All right. How can we go about this? And I will come back to the other slide I have prepared. So what is the effect of service quality on how satisfied customers are? I could already say now that this most probably, in the way it is formulated and visualized, will also demand to use one specific statistical test. You've been studying to use 3 different statistical tests. Actually, you've been trained to conduct bivariate analysis, meaning being able to analyze the relationship or the association between 2 concepts, between, like in this example, and service quality and customer satisfaction. If measured on the highest level of measurement, will probably will be tested by means of a Pearson-R correlation. To be 100% certain that this is my test, then I will definitely need to know more about how service quality is operationally defined and how is it measured exactly with which variables. But ideally, those variables will be indeed of a highest level of measurement. So I'm able to talk about linear relationships between service quality and customer satisfaction, and no doubt that will lead me to Pearson-R correlation. The other 2 statistical tests that you studied are the chi-square test and the t-test, and they are not at all suitable for this specific example. So again, thinking about alignment, doubting what the effect is of, not knowing what the effect is of service quality on level of satisfaction will most probably lead me to formulating such kind of a question. Again, the idea is to be able to predict what possibly can be done in terms of service quality, predict how changes in service quality I mean, will affect customer satisfaction. So there's no other kind of design than quantitative and a bit of a statistical testing that you will have to introduce in order to be able to reach that aim. Once again, this is the alignment that I'm talking about, and I hope this example visualizes it to a certain extent how it goes. I would like to go back, and that's the last topic for today, about the plan of analysis and the idea what exactly needs to be in such a plan. I only need to quickly close the polls, and hopefully I can share with you the results afterwards. So I can move on further. Yes, I want to save everything, and voila. I don't see any questions in the meanwhile. Okay, so there were more examples I've been thinking of, but I do not think that now this is, there's time for it and the need to talk about those 3 examples. So as I said, the last topic of plan of analysis, for those of you who are following the bachelor thesis course, I think the very last assignment, which is due next week for the majority of the group, is called Analyze This. Actually, that assignment is your plan of analysis. Oh, interesting. You cannot see it. I need to share that one with you as well. Let me see. You can see my screen now, and not only my PowerPoint. So the ideal way to go about deciding what actually should be in your analysis is to work out this specific assignment. And this specific assignment does exactly that. It helps you formulate those steps in the analysis which are related to how you want to approach your data. I'm going to scroll down to quantitative and qualitative. And even if you're adopting the design approach, this applies for you too. Imagine that you have, because there's so many tools in the design thinking, but imagine that you have decided to use a specific brainstorming technique and not an interview or questionnaire as a more traditional advisory and a business plan report. Sorry. Then you will most probably end up again with written text. You will end up with audio fragments, with very often qualitative data that you will need to analyze in a systematic way. So again, following what is suggested in this assignment under the qualitative and the quantitative heading applies also for the design reports and not only for the advisory and business plans. So if we have a look specifically first at the quantitative part, the last steps which I covered at the beginning of this webinar are meant exactly to do that. So thinking of your plan of analysis, first in quantitative terms, you will have to decide on which descriptives that you're going to use. So that's the very first level in statistics, talking about descriptive statistics. And that's nothing more, nothing less in deciding which variables you would like to describe more in detail by means of which graphs and or charts. Some most probably will have to be highlighted and explained in detail in the main text, and some you might decide to add as an attachment. Not all variables need necessarily to be part of your main report by means of descriptive statistics, but only the ones you really think add value to your analysis. Next, more important one is to decide based on hypotheses, if you have those, which statistical tests are you going to use and why is it appropriate? The example I just gave with the relationship between service quality and satisfaction is meant to do exactly that. Considering the level of your measurement, you will know which one of the three tests that you've been using in the past, or you learned how to use in the past, is the one applicable for you. I still see, even last semester, so many students who at this stage somehow ignore this important decision in how you are going to analyze your data, regardless of the type of data, and end up afterwards, after having all the data collected, and ending up with a conclusion that you cannot run the analysis that you really want in order to achieve the aim of your project. So take time to work this one out already, regardless how difficult it may seem. If it's quantitative design that you're opting, these are, I have some tips in terms of page numbers and tables that Gray is using in his book, Doing Research in the Real World, where you can have a look, depending on the level of measurement of your variables, which type of test you're going to end up with. All this is not new, so if somehow doesn't ring a bell to you, then it means that you really need to go back to those specific chapters in the books or clips online, which we provide, or you can find yourself via YouTube too. So that's about what actually the plan of analysis is meant when we talk about quantitative type of research. Some of you might also want to take it one step further in terms of statistics, but that is really up to you. And if it fits the purpose of your project, then we are definitely encouraging, for instance, factor analysis is a type of analysis run by some of our graduates in the past. If you have decided to run qualitative project, then the very, very first step in your plan of analysis is to think of the steps that you're going to take in the coding process. and think, for instance, of your coding strategy. So is it deductive, inductive, or a combination of both? If you have a deductive strategy in coding, what are then the codes that you already have formulated? How are they specifically related, for instance, to the purpose or to your literature review? That is what is mentioned here, to justify your decision based on theory. If you recall the webinar on research questions, there I've shared an example of my master thesis and the idea that I've used organizational learning theory with 9 propositions in understanding how organizations learn and how that affects their innovation capabilities. Well, actually, I already had 9 codes to start with, so I used a combination of deductive and inductive strategy in coding because I knew and I had decided in advance to focus on those 9 for sure, but kept my mind open for any other specific and interesting themes which might occur in the process. And this obviously goes also for observation if that's your data collection instrument. And then last but not least, think of the approach to analyze your qualitative data. So far, you've been mainly introduced to thematic analysis. So you've been introduced in previous years in searching for overarching themes. So searching for similarities and differences in opinions and searching for those themes which reveal itself during interviews, focus groups, or observations. But I also think that for some of you at this stage, content analysis might be definitely the strategy in analyzing qualitative data. So it's worth checking those type of analysis out. Just very simple, because there are many different techniques in content analysis, but content analysis can very nicely quantify and also lead you to some emerging themes in written text, for instance, annual reports, trend reports from the past or current ones. It looks like a sophisticated word cloud, which actually gives you an idea what really matters, and it uses the power of linguistics, so the power of speech, with the idea that if a word occurs often, then it must mean something. To put it very simply, what content analysis can mean for you. Last but not least, related to analysis, I think you should not underestimate software that you can use in order to speed up the process. When it comes to quantitative type of analysis, obviously we trust that you're going to use Excel and or SPSS. SPSS is a statistical package in social sciences, one of the widely used software package to run analysis. You could buy it for a very special student rate at searchspot.nl, but you can also run the majority of those types of analysis with Excel. And we offered within the course some clips on using both programs for simple statistical, at least for bivariate statistical analysis. I have to admit that Excel has some limitations. When it comes to descriptive statistics, you don't even need to use Excel. If you're using Qualtrics will even produce much better graphics and much better charts to you than Excel does, better in terms of level of visualization. I think they're more sophisticated. When it comes to software in qualitative type of analysis, unfortunately, SearchSpot does not offer anything for a friendly price. I don't think they offer anything at all. So what I would like you to know is that there are at least 2 major players on the market for such kind of special software. They're called Atlas T and Vivo. They're too expensive, so absolutely not recommended to buy or something like that. It is not required to use those 2. But I know from experience myself and from some other graduates that they can be really a time saver. I used Atlas T, for instance, myself when I was writing my master's thesis. And it's, in terms of coding process and finding relationships between coding, I think it really saves lots and lots of time. And it's very user-friendly to be able to see how codes within different documents are related. So a call to all of you, by the way, when we finish this webinar, which I'm going to wrap up in a minute or two, we're very curious, and you are all going to get the evaluation form again of this webinar. We are very curious at this stage if you will be interested in a short, very hands-on webinar on using SPSS and or using Atlas T or NVivo, the trial versions of those, which you can apply in your project. And if you're very interested in something like that, please let us know. Joy, Hans, and myself will be able to offer you something like that. Not next week, because I think that's too early. But then we can decide together what's the best timing. I believe maybe in 3 weeks, when you already have your data coming in, qualitative or quantitative, we'll be more than happy to explain with the software on our screens how you can work with it. So I saw already one enthusiastic reaction. So please fill in the survey afterwards, and then we can definitely work with it. So this is, I believe, for today. I'm going to go back to my webinar. And this is indeed what I had in mind. Let me see. Yeah. The next one and last one scheduled in this series is about quality in research. And I'm going to zoom into next week on validity, reliability, and utility. I'm also going to add also part of it to a certain extent, especially reliability on the ethical aspect of your research. So when you think of reflecting on your research design, for instance, I think this webinar can offer you some pointers to work with. So thank you for your attention. I'm going to have a quick look if there are some questions which I can cover. I don't see anything in the Q&A for this for now, and I don't quite see anything in the chat. Let me quickly have a look. No, nothing at this point. So thank you very much for your time again, and looking forward to see you at school or during the next webinar. Thank you. Bye bye.